Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Screams and Sorrow. This is the podcast where we talk about everything metal and emo, and I have a special guest with me today, Alex Mott, who is joining me for the very first time, and it's a special episode because we are talking about Blink-182. Welcome.
Talk about it just one more time, right?
I see what you did there. I like that. Yeah, man, that's good. I'm really excited to have you here, man. We've known each other for quite a while, even though we've never met really face to face. But
no, just internet buddies.
I know, but we've collaborated on a bunch of stuff. And really, when I was looking for someone to help me out, since John is really busy right now because he actually works and has a family and Christmas time and everything. So the funny thing is, when I wanted to start this podcast, the reason I wanted to start it was one album, and that was the Blink-182 One More Time album.
Of course.
And I was kind of scared that we were never going to actually do it because it's been out for almost 2 months at this point. And I'm like, do we go back to it? And I'm actually kind of happy that we're doing it now for two reasons. One, I let it sit for a while, so I kind of let that hype die a little bit, and I think I can talk about it a little bit more objectively. And two, there's no one that I know that loves pop punk music as much as I do as you.
Aw, that's beautiful. You're probably right, though. You are probably right. It's got to be me.
So, man, we just gotta jump right in here. What were your thoughts on this album?
It's so nice to have a band from when we were teens come back and do an album, something after a big gap, a big hiatus or whatever, and for it to actually be worth the hype.
Right?
Like, it feels like that gets rarer and rarer. And I'm sure it's not just, this generation of music. Any band, like if you listen to whatever, I can't remember the name, but The Who's most recent record, it's like, oh, cool, The Who made a new thing. Right? Like, more topically, I listened to the new Taking Back Sunday record recently, and it was like, oh, that's a shame.
And you are the biggest Taking Back Sunday fan that I personally know.
I almost wore my Taking Back Sunday shirt for this, but no, I wore a more relevant one because we got to get into the points of the Cure, Mark Hoppus's Cure fandom later in this album. But this was so good. And I've been listening to it multiple times. Like you said, it's a good thing we gave it a couple of months, right? You want to make sure that you're not just having that recency bias, just being excited because it's a new thing. But I feel like that 3-album middle section of Blink's career, Enema, Take Off Your Pants, and the Untitled, are all just flawless. They are right up there at the top of the pop punk canon, right? And this is almost as good. I feel like it's not quite to that level, but it is very close.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth, man. Right when I was about to jump in there, I was going to say that, and I may want to have that conversation a little bit later, put ourselves on the spot, because I've been thinking about it, and it's really hard to do, but where does this fall? And it kind of sounds like this already kind of falls a little bit behind those 3 albums, and I can see that, but I think a case can be made to kind of put it somewhere smack in the middle of that, but I would love to talk about that in a bit.
What I would say just very quickly on that is I think there's a strong Zack Snyder's Justice League argument here, where it is a bit long, the deluxe edition, especially at 19 tracks, but there is a really good shorter work here. If you trim some fat out here, there's actually something really good here.
Yeah.
It's a little bloated, but the good stuff in here is just so good.
And it's awesome that you say that, because I am a huge Blink-182 fan. This is the band that got me into punk, got me into rock, got me whatever you want to call it. Before this band, I was listening to Britney Spears, Shania Twain, because I grew up in Canada, don't hate me. These were the bands that these were the singers that I would listen. Ace of Base, because you grew up listening to what the Bangles. Just another manic Monday. People probably don't even know who those people are.
We can't diss the Bangles.
But I still remember listening to Enema of the State for the first time, but when I became a diehard, was Take Off Your Pants and Jackets. That for me, a lot of people say Empire Strikes Back is their favorite Star Wars. Mine is Return of the Jedi. Just like a lot of people say Enema of the State.
Absolutely. Of course it's Return of the Jedi.
Well, there you go. People say Enema of the State is their number one, man. Take Off Your Pants and Jacket. That is my Return of the Jedi.
Really?
Yeah, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But okay. I thought this album was Man, like them coming back is one thing. Like this is a dream come true for me. Like if anyone saw my reaction to One More Time when it came out, like I was bawling by the end, and it wasn't for the clicks, it wasn't for the likes, it was literally how it made me feel, because it kind of felt like a piece of me that was missing was back together again, and that it came back the way that it did, with the emotion that it did, with the not just the attention but the love that we would want from it. You can hear that throughout this entire album. And even though I agree with you that there are some tracks on here that I don't think necessarily flow with the entire album, I think all of them were made with that same love and quality in mind. And they probably had a whole lot more they wanted to put on here, but it's just like this is kind of what they felt made sense.
Right. And after so long, I feel like you have to go a little bit more with how much you're putting out. If they came back with a 10-track album, it'd be like, that's it. But no, they came back with a bunch of different ideas, different genres, different song lengths, which I love. The couple of short ones in here. And I think it is the right choice for them to have put the whole thing in. I don't think the weak songs are songs I would skip. I'm just saying they're not like, what were the years? Were they 99, 2001 and 2003? Is that?
Yeah.
And
that's right.
Yeah, for that 4-year run, there are a couple that are below those in quality, but they're not like skippable tracks. I'm not going to say like I hate Fell in Love. I'm just going to say I think Fell in Love is the weakest song on the album.
Really? Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into this a little bit. We're not going to go track by track, but there's definitely some things we want to call out. But I think we can't start this conversation any better than talking about Anthem Part 3. And
of course,
I'm going to let you take it from here, because I have thoughts on this song, but I'll let you talk first.
What bolder statement can you do after a hiatus than doing a part 3 to a 2-parter that everyone grew up obsessing over? Like the dumb rock opera that I wrote as a teenager started with a ripoff of Anthem Part 2. Like something that I played over the top of it.
And for those of you who, for the listeners who are, and people watching, if you guys didn't know, which I'm sure you don't, Alex is an amazing musician. We've actually collaborated on a song that is out. I'll actually link in here. We might as well do some promotion for it, right?
Ooh.
Our little cloud punk album with the one song, Sticks and Stones, that we wrote, which is it's kind of that, right? It's a pop punk tribute, kind of like Blink inspired, Avril Lavigne, kind of. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And you lay down the bass track in that, and the drums.
And the drums, yeah.
Yeah, which was really cool. But
I think I might have a layer of guitar somewhere, but yeah.
Yeah, and you've done punk covers that are up on your channel, which people should absolutely check out, which I'm a big fan of.
Anyway,
yeah,
Anthem
crazy.
Part 3, bold statement. And it's not like, because this happens occasionally with bands that have multi-parters. Like, do you remember, like, how are you as a Metallica fan?
So I got into Metallica after my pop punk phase.
Okay.
Which never really died, but yeah. I've kept up with their newer albums also.
Okay, so like when The Unforgiven Part 3 happened.
Okay.
You remember that?
No.
Did that come in? Oh, no. I think it was on Death Magnetic. Because they did The Unforgiven Part 1 and Part 2, ages ago. The Unforgiven 3 was on Death Magnetic in 2008. And that, to me, that was like, oh crap, this is going to be crazy. Because I'm not a big Metallica fan, but I was very curious. Like, is this going to be like the big thing now? And it was, I don't know. To me, it's just like, it was fine. It just felt like we're just doing another one of these to try to generate some hype, I guess. It didn't feel to me as authentic or earned. It's like, it felt like an unnecessary superhero cameo in a movie that's not doing very well, Anthem Part 3 is Endgame. Like, it's meaningful, it impacts, it hits you in ways that are genuine and not just hype-based. Because it doesn't just base it off of it musically, but the themes of the songs, right? Because the first anthem, and mostly the second one, were essentially youth anthems against, crappy adults, right? Like saying that, we have some issues, but it's like literally you're to blame, right? It's your fault. If we're fucked up, you're to blame. And this one, it's been what, 22 years since Anthem Part 2 in 2001.
Man,
So there's been an entire, well, that's the point though. There's an entire generational shift in this one.
Mm-hmm.
So the focus is not from a kid's point of view here anymore. This is from the older, more weathered point of view, looking back, having, regrets or pride in certain things that you've done. When Mark Hoppus says that you look back and find that no one cared that you died, like that is the line of the album for me.
No one gave a fuck that you did.
Like, holy
yeah,
jeez.
You just you hit it, man. Like this song was, even though One More Time came out first, and it definitely gave me like a punch in the gut emotion wise, because that one is very meta, right? Very much talking about them and their story. The whole album does. Yeah, the whole album does. And Anthem Part 3 does it as well. But what I don't think people give both Mark and Tom, I think they give Travis the respect he deserves. But I don't think they give Mark and Tom necessarily the respect that they deserve
Right.
in just how good they are at songwriting. Because they don't just make it catchy. They don't just make it, they don't just make killer hooks and killer sounds, right? They tell stories that are so personal to them, even if they're, dick joke related, but
Yeah.
there's stuff that everyone can identify with. And right now it almost gave me chills when you were talking about how it's like that generational shift, because I remember when Anthem Part 3 started and it starts with the guitar and you're like, this immediately takes me back to Anthem Part 2. It takes me back to 2001, sitting in my mom's like minivan, driving somewhere, and people were giving me shit that I was talking about that I had Blink-182 on a cassette player. Like, listen, all right, back then we had cassette players in our cars. We had cassette players at home. Yeah, we had CD players also, but like Discmans weren't reliable. They would skip a lot. They ate up batteries. So I would take my CD, put it in the boombox, and convert it to a cassette.
Oh,
And
okay.
that is how I had the Take Off Your Pants and Jacket cassette with me everywhere that I went.
Nice.
Yeah. So, it takes me back to that time. The song starts and it immediately transports you back there. But then when the song actually kicks in, and the first lyrics are, everything that we've tried will keep waking up to that light. We'll see rising of a new tide. We are starting up a new life. Like a lot of people at our age, and we're talking like millennials or like 30s, right? Like a lot of us are going through like those transitions, those times, we're seeing it. And, they talk about when your dreams, they seem like they're dead, like a pounding deep in your head, when your job has gone to deep shit. If you've fallen, like the more you read these lyrics, as poppy as they are, as much as you want to sing along to them,
They're
they
approaching
hit
midlife crisis.
they hit hard. And then when Mark, you have that little pause and he says that no one gives a fuck that you died, I remember just that hitting me in the chest.
Well, but
like a
that
ton
hits
of
even
bricks.
harder because of Mark's first line. Because to me, like the first thing was obviously this album starting off with Tom's vocals. It was like Tom's back. Praise be. This is such a blessing for us. But then as soon as Mark comes in, that to me was like, oh, hearing them both together again. And what's the first thing that he says? After you had the time of your life. That was 20 years ago, man. That's when we did that. That's when we sang Reckless Abandon, right? After all of that, flatlined and led towards the light, you'll despair the wreckage, right? Saying like we had a blast a long time ago and things might have just gotten worse since then. Like, jeez. I mean, hopefully
It's
not
crazy.
entirely for everybody, but for a lot of people,
It
yeah,
did, in one way or
stuff
another.
just it got harder at the very least, right? So,
Yeah, and I got to give a shout out also to Mark, and he's been vocal about it. But like, what a lot of people don't realize is that not only did he beat cancer, but like
yeah.
the treatment destroyed his vocal cords. Like he had to go through vocal therapy. He had to learn how to sing. Some people have mentioned that he sounds a little like flat or something. Like this dude just put in the work to be able not just to release this album, but to go on a world tour.
Yeah.
And that's just crazy. This song, as it builds and builds, and then you get to that kind of bridge section where it's only Tom's guitar, and they come in with the catchiest fucking lines at the end.
It's my head, it's my mind.
It just like it makes me happy, but it broke me on my reaction. I remember, and it was great to see in the comments that I wasn't the only one, that everyone went through that same journey. And what I love about this song is that if you know Blink's history and you've been there since the beginning, this hits hard. But even if you don't, it can still hit because it's just it applies to anyone. You know what I mean?
Right. It's not necessarily self-referential. It's a universal thing, but it hits harder knowing what they went through, right? And especially for me, because this is the second time they got back together, right? I got like invested in Blink late. My first Blink album was the Greatest Hits album.
It's a good album though.
It is good. Not Now, I think, is a top 10 Blink song. But so I started deep diving after they had broken up. Before that, I just knew a handful from the radio or whatever. So I remember, Grammys 2008, they got up on stage, they announced they were back together. I ran up and down the stairs like 5 times in a row screaming, I can actually see them. And I did. I saw them twice. I saw them in 2009 and I saw them in 2012.
Okay.
Yeah, 2012. And both times it was like, I mean, that was really good, but do they care?
Oh no.
Because that middle one, it was a little weird, right? Like, did you see them during that first?
So I was living in Mexico during that time, and I don't know
okay.
if that matters or anything. I don't remember them necessarily either coming in. I wouldn't have had the money anyway to go see them.
Right.
But no, I never got to see them live. Until 2017, I saw the Matt Skiba era when California came out. And like I love California. I think it's a great album. It's not a Blink album, right? There's
halfway between Blink and Plus 44,
they've got hints of it, but I think you are missing the Tom element. And there's so many bands out there, and I've said this with like Atreyu, right? Atreyu without Alex isn't Atreyu. I'm sorry. Like it doesn't. He may not be the best vocalist in the world, but it just doesn't sound the same, right? And I think Tom even more so had a bigger influence in the type of songs that they were writing. And you can kind of notice that in Neighborhood also, where he was like in his Angel and Airwaves, kind of vibe and stuff like that. And he's
There's
been very
a little
open.
bit of that on this one, but not nearly as much as Neighborhoods.
Yeah, but that's what I love about this album.
Oh yeah, because before, when I said I was going to come on here, I listened to everything from Enema of the State onward just to get a refresher, right? And with Neighborhoods, when it came out, I was coping really hard. Like, no, this is great. This is wonderful. And there are some good songs on there, but there's a lack of energy to the whole thing that this album does not suffer from, where it feels subdued. It feels a little old and crotchety. And this one's a lot older and doesn't have that.
But it feels kind of disjointed also, where it's just like it doesn't seem like the ideas were lining up and like everyone was kind of on the same page. And you were mentioning like had I seen them before, and kind of going back down the line of you mentioning that like during that era, and I think a lot of people felt it and know, and you can see it like in their live performances.
Yeah,
just kind of
because when I saw them live both times, 2009, 2012, Tom half played his parts. A lot of open strings, just like a lot of muddly, messing, noodling around. He was not sharp. He was not on top of his game. He mumbled his lyrics the way someone would do a bad impression of himself or of him,
Yeah.
It was a little sad because like Mark and Travis were killing it, doing their best. But even then, like Mark wasn't pushing his vocals super hard either, right? Mm-hmm. I brought this up specifically because you talked about his vocal rehab. And I think he's better now than he was during that first reunion. Because I remember hearing Stockholm Syndrome live and being like, oh, here it comes, my favorite Blink song. And then when it gets to
that's your favorite Blink song?
Stockholm Syndrome is my favorite Blink song.
Stockholm Syndrome, people have given me shit about this. I don't know if it's my favorite Blink song, but on the Blink-182 Untitled is my favorite Blink song in that album.
Look, I think there's something magical about when bright poppy bands go heavier or when heavy bands go slightly brighter. I think there's an in between. Like my favorite Linkin Park songs are Blackout and Mark the Graves. They're major key songs that are still heavy as balls. But there's something about when you're in between. You're not going straight heavy, but you're not going straight into like major poppy stuff. That fusion is like crack for me. That like my favorite Blink songs are like Hearts All Gone, Stockholm Syndrome, Terrified. More Than You Know is gunning for that top spot right now.
Really?
I adore that song so much.
So let's talk about that a little bit more then. So, yeah, and I think we can all agree that, like, and I don't know if you've seen them live in their new tour.
No, I only saw them during that first reunion.
I got to see them live for the very first time. I got lucky with tickets. I did not spend $1,500. I can promise you that. But I did get to see them, and holy shit! Like when Mark got up and talked about Adam's song and what it meant to him, and he talked about his cancer, like people were bawling around me, and I was one of them. Right when they were talking about doing obviously their dick jokes and all, it was just so much like you could tell these guys were having a blast being back together, and it was like a party, a family all together, just having a great time. But you mentioned we talked a lot about Anthem Part 3, so I don't know if you wanted to jump into another one. You mentioned More Than You
There's
Know.
just one other thing about Anthem. So this, I don't know if it's on purpose. I hope it's an Easter egg. So with the first Anthem, it's in B, right? And it starts off with, and then with Anthem Part 2, we go up one to C for the little jigga. And then on this one, what comes after B and C? Well, obviously, it's D. Yeah, so that means when we get Anthem Part 4 in 20 years, obviously that song's an E, baby.
That's awesome. I didn't even. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have noticed that, but yeah, that's a cool little. It's
because they all start with a chug of a single power chord, and it goes up one each time.
So it sounds. That's why it sounds similar. You're listening to an Anthem song,
Yes.
but it just sounds that little bit different. That's so
Right,
cool.
because they'd use different rhythms, different speed, but it starts with a little power chord chug. And what's more punk rock than a power chord chug, right?
Nothing, man.
Absolutely nothing.
So just real
Maybe
quick,
bad vocals.
I want to give a shout out to Dance With Me because this was the second song that they released. And obviously everyone has seen, the video at this point where they're completely remaking, and it completely escaped me right now. The Ramones, their album and or their song "Wanna Be Sedated," and it was great. But the fact that we get like this huge anthem to start that is emotional, right? That kind of takes us back, and then immediately we get the fun line from Tom right after that part. Like I'm bawling, and then all I hear is, when I teach masturbation, just have fun with it, right? And then he goes into one of the, I don't know, the poppiest, funnest riff I've heard from Blink in just
it's amazing
years.
But what's great about that is that's a style of riff that he's done before, right? It's that one open string pull-offs over and over again, right? Eminem's, he did that. What is it? Natives on Neighborhood. He did it there. It's this very, very Tom DeLonge little lick on a single string.
Didn't he do it on Dumpweed also?
Dumpweed. Oh, no, Dumpweed's a little different. But this is like, you know how to play Thunderstruck by AC/DC, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that, where you have your one string and you're doing hammer-ons and pull-offs on one string. It's something that he's been doing, as far as I'm aware, since Eminem's. I think that was the first one. And it was just great on the second song. He's like, hey, you know that thing that sounds like me when I do it? Here's one. And I'm like, great. It's like if you turn on a song with Tom Morello on it, you instantly know, I know who's playing. This riff was like, yeah, that is the most Tom DeLonge thing you could have done near the beginning of this album.
It's so good. And the chorus, like when they just go into ole ole, 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 yeah, we're doing it love. I don't know, man. Like, and I don't know if it's
really
kind of like
goofy at first, but I'm singing along so much every time I'm in the van listening to this.
Yeah, you're right. It does sound kind of goofy at first because like it's something that like you hear that like I grew up again in Mexico. There's a lot of ole oles happening, and you hear that in like Ricky Martin's song ole ole ole. Here we go, ole ole ole. It's just like that's what you expect, right? when these guys come on and they're singing that, at first it caught me off guard, but then I'm like, this is the catchiest shit I've heard.
Right.
In
We're doing it
forever.
all
And-
night long. Whatever it is, maybe
Yeah.
just singing ole ole. We're doing it all night long, baby.
And this is where, like, I've been listening to a whole lot of metal, and I've been talking. A lot of people are of the same opinion, but the thing that metal has lost, and metalcore specifically, is that they used to have hooks. They used to have parts that would just stick in your brain. And the thing with Dance With Me, almost more than any other song on here, is it could be a random day. I haven't listened to Blink in 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden I'm just going ole ole ole, and I know it has to do with this song.
That's the hook that gets you.
So, you mentioned earlier how there was some Angel and Airwaves influences in this album, and one of the things that really
Yes.
stood out to me was that this felt, before, when everyone was kind of doing their own projects, we have Tom, who wanted to do something a little bit more hardcore, so he did Boxcar Racer, and then Mark was just kind of like, okay, well, then he does Plus 44, and then we have the Transplants in there, and then obviously when Tom was going through more of a, what he calls kind of like his kind of emotional phase, where he didn't really know kind of what he wanted to do, who he was, like he had the whole Angel and Airwaves piece, which in their own right, Angel and Airwaves, fantastic band.
Sure.
The cool thing is that this album feels like everyone brought what inspires them, what they want to do, and for the first time maybe
Yes.
said, hey, let's do that, right? And you hear immediately when like Fell in Love came on, I'm like, this is The Cure, right? You get that also with like Blink Wave. That comes on and I'm just like, this is Blink 182 self-titled. And then Terrified comes
So-
on. I'm like, this is Boxcar
yeah.
Racer. Right? And then, Blink Wave even sounds like Angel and Airwaves. And there's just all over this album, it just feels like everyone was doing what they loved and they allowed themselves to do that.
See, that's why I think that the self-titled is their best album. It's because the other ones, from that 3-album run are so good, but they are a little samey, It's mostly the same flavor all the way through. But like when you're listening to the self-titled and it gets broken up by the Fallen interlude, it's just like, oh, okay, we're grooving for a little bit here. Then it goes right into Go, just slamming as hard as they've ever gone. And I think that is their best work. But this does a lot of that as well, where it's like the sum of everything that they've been through. Because, there's a lot of themes on this of coming back after a long time being apart, brothers into strangers once again, all of that, and everything they've gone through, everything they've accumulated. They're not pushing any of it to the side. They're not being like, no, we got to get back to our roots. No, they're doing everything. All of them, all of who they are is included on this. And like you said, a lot of that is The Cure. In Other Side, he mentions they saw Susie and the Banshees, a band that Robert Smith was in for a little while. And then right after that, he says 10:15 on a Saturday Night, which is the first song from The Cure's first album, From Three Imaginary Boys. And there's that, you can hear it in a lot of Angel and Airwaves, like you said, but there are certain Cure tones that are very chorusy, reverby, that do just sound like they're The Cure. The biggest thing they've ever done like this is obviously Snake Charmer on the deluxe edition of Neighborhoods. But like you said, you can definitely hear it in songs like Fell in Love and Blink Wave.
Yeah, I mean, Mark mentioned in the Zayn interview that The Cure is what made him pick up bass. Like he knew he wanted to write music. He just didn't know what instrument to play. And when he heard The Cure, he's like, "Oh, it's the bass. This is what I'm learning," which is so
Right.
cool. Because Fell in Love, you mentioned, was the weakest song. I think it's a good follow up to Dance With Me. Because I think, again, we're kind of hitting back to those untitled feels, and I think it's the message and what it's tying in. It's really good. But then, or not the message, the theme of what we're getting from the album. Because I feel like everyone, you're like, oh shit, like oh shit, like oh shit, and then my biggest oh shit moment in this album had to be Terrified. When Terrified came on, and I heard the grungy distortion. I'm like, right off the bat, I'm like, are they doing a Boxcar Racer song on here? And then the verse kicks in. I'm like, okay, maybe, tiny voices. Okay, I get that. And then the chorus comes in with the distorted vocals. I'm like, this is Boxcar Racer right here.
Yeah.
And there's only one thing that would get me more excited than a new Blink album, and it's a new Boxcar Racer album.
Racer album.
Because I love that album. This was the biggest surprise for me on this album. Honestly, this was like I could not believe, because I felt like Boxcar Racer was always kind of like a little bit of a riff. Like Mark felt kind of left out because Travis and Tom did kind of their own thing. And he, even though he does have a vocal part in one of the songs, it just kind of feel like he was left to the side.
Yeah.
So I felt it's always been kind of like, you know, we'll never really get that again because it kind of hurts deep. And the fact that we got this song on here.
And this is the way forward. Just do that style of music with everybody. It's so good. I mean, I like the Boxcar Racer album too. I really do. But I think this is better than anything that's on it. I think Terrified is the best of that style that Tom has ever sang on. It's incredible.
I like it. Yeah, and again, kind of going through the theme of the album, I think one of the things, having listened to it multiple times, if I had to kind of nitpick this, there is something that I felt was a little bit overdone. I was extremely happy that they did a lot of vocal layering, which was Mark and Tom singing different lyrics over each other, which, you know, you got that a lot in Feeling This, and I think from there they started to do it a lot more, and here we got a lot of that, and I think you got to do that. They sound so different. It just sounds so good. The one thing that I noticed is that I got a little tired of the repetition within choruses, where the lyrics are just the same thing over and over again, which, it's a Blink thing, but I don't know if it's because there's 17 tracks, but there is so much of that here, and some of it hits, but a lot of it doesn't.
No, I get that. I think that's an aging rocker thing. I've noticed that happens a lot with bands as they get older. They tend to try to just stick a hook in the chorus instead of writing an entire chorus. The worst offender in this, I think, is Green Day's Uno. That thing was just obscene amounts of repetition. But like even my beloved Billy Talent has done that a little bit recently. So I think that it just seems to come with a lot of bands with age. I don't know why that is. Maybe they're just more comfortable sitting on a line for 30 seconds. But there is a bit of that.
And it's like you see that in like You Don't Know What You've Got, where it's you
don't know what you got. You don't know what you got.
Yes, that is.
And it's just like over
biggest
and over
offender
again
on the album. That one bugs me in particular because the music is so good. The music is so fantastic in that song. And then you hit the chorus and it's just a single cliche, which is the same cliche that Linkin Park did on their Till It's Gone on the Hunting Party, where it's just that line again. And it's like, guys, you can use the line, but can we not repeat it 4 times and pretend that's a chorus?
Yeah, so there was a lot of that on this album that I think after like repeat listens, I was just like, kind of again, especially with a chorus that was so catchy as like Dance With Me and Anthem Part 3, and it just and Terrified also, it just started going down that hill. And I will say, in my personal opinion, the first half of the album hits much harder than the second half of the album.
I think that's fair.
And I think it kind of lost a little bit of its way. I think there's definitely songs, like there's no song in here that I would say, take it out. But by the time I get to the Hurt interlude, it's kind of loses me a little bit. With Other Side, I like it, but like Childhood, I'll be honest, I don't 100% like it, but I think it's one of their more kind of like meta, kind of like it's a good closer song. Turpentine, I have a lot of fun with. And Bad News grew on me because both Bad News and Blink Wave at first, I don't know if I felt it as much. And then the more I listened to it, the more I like them.
Yeah, I was going to say Bad News was my biggest grower. That and Childhood, actually. Where at first I was like, this is fine. But re-listening, I think Bad News has some of the fiercest instrumentation, which you don't really notice on first listen. But when you put on some like good headphones and really dig into Bad News, I think that just rips the whole thing. But Turpentine, oh man, to me, Turpentine almost sounds like that could have been a Boxcar Racer song as well. It's in a similar vein. And I love picking a random word like that and not knowing which way you're supposed to pronounce it. Be like, whatever, I'm going to use both and I'm going to rhyme with both.
Did you question yourself when you were listening to it? Be like, shit, which one is it?
Well, no, because I've already thought about this ever since I was a Boy Scout and we were stripping paint and everyone around me was saying it both ways. And I'm like, what is it? The terp. Just give me the terp.
Turn This Off, the 23-second kind of Happy Holidays, You Bastard style song. I'm so happy that they
Yeah.
put this in here. It's
And
fun.
they did two of them.
It,
They did two of
and
them.
it's funny.
Yeah. But I mean, because
well,
the other one,
Fuckface-
You Talk Too Much, You Talk Too Much, that one is the most punk rock thing they've ever done. Like that's
Absolutely.
back to like Fear and Black Flag. That is amazing. I love that. I would, if an album's going to be, 17 or 19 tracks long, you got to shove in a couple weird little things in there.
Yeah, and it's very like if you didn't have that, you'd almost question, is this a Blink album, right? Especially a Blink comeback
Right.
album, which is what it is. And then they released two other songs. One was called
Cut
See
Me Off
You.
and See You. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've only been listening to the deluxe edition, and it puts those into the album. It doesn't do what like Neighborhoods did, where it puts Fighting the Gravity, and even if she falls at the end, it inserts them in different points, which I think works really well. Because Cut Me Off, and I saw you have this moment in
Yeah.
your reaction video, that hook, the melody, that I'm a landline, not a lifeline. That's my favorite vocal part in the whole album. I think that's stunning.
Did you watch my reaction?
You think I don't? You think I don't watch everything you put up, Eric? Come
You
on.
beautiful human being. Look at you. I appreciate that. That's awesome. Yeah, and Cut Me Off, I kind of mentioned, like, I like the song. It wasn't, like, my favorite, but I could see it fitting in there. Whereas See You just felt kind of like, how did they not include this just in the original album itself?
It's
And that
really
was my
good.
favorite out of two. But, like, people go back and forth because I've heard people say, well, Cut Me Off, what's better? And some people, and that's just what's beautiful about it. They're both great. This,
Right.
for me, album is easily a 10 out of 10, a contender for album of the year for me, not just because of what it is in the history, but because of how it made me feel. And that to me is important in any of the media that I listen to or watch or whatever, is really how does it
Yeah.
make me feel?
Oh,
And
absolutely.
This really made me feel stuff, but I got to ask the question, where do you rank it?
See, I've been thinking about that a lot this week, and I think that's just a meaningless exercise because, all right, so this
Coward's
is
way
similar
out.
to, I think similar to the tracks that we were just talking about, the ones like, oh, maybe it should be included, maybe it shouldn't. I think all of those are going to be incredibly impactful for somebody, right? And they may not be universal bangers, but this is the same, I think, with movies, games, music. The 7 out of 10 that hits with you specifically is far better than a 10 out of 10 that everybody loves.
I like that.
And I think that a bunch of tracks on here are going to be those, where for some people it'll be like, yeah, that was fine. I don't think anything's skip worthy on the album. But I think, like you're seeing arguing over which one's better because people are latching on to some of these already, and it's only been a couple months, that there's something about each song that is going to resonate with different groups of people. It's all really good, Eric. It's all really good. I can't. Ranking it is difficult. I think Enema, Take Off Your Pants and Jacket, and the untitled or self-titled or whatever they refer to it as, I think those are obvious S tiers, and I think this is a strong A tier. I think in a year I'll know better if you want me to actually rank it. My gut says right now that it would probably be tied for second with Take Off Your Pants and Jacket and above Enema of the State, because Enema of the State is really good, but I think a lot of it is just fun. Whereas while you were saying, or like you were saying, how it makes you feel is ultimately most important. And this does resonate with me a lot more than most of Enema of the State.
That's great. So that's great, man. That's awesome. I love to hear that. And obviously our rankings can change because, if this album came out in 2016, would I rank it at the top, right? Versus where it is in 20. I think right now in my life, having had that moment, having the quality of the songs that are on here and just how personal it is to them, I do think
there's a
this
lot
is one of their
backstory.
They say that they feel like this is their best album, and I can understand why they feel like this is I think musically, I think emotionally, I think what they did writing this, and I can see why they feel like this is their best album. On my top is Take Off Your Pants and Jackets. That's my Return of the Jedi, right? And self-titled is, a very close follow-up to that, because that they're both perfect albums. I would even say
Absolutely.
they're tied for first place, if you will. And then
I'd agree with that.
And then right after that, for me, above Enema of the State is this one more time.
Wild. Would you look at that?
Yeah.
You stumbled upon the exact correct answer, just like me. Isn't that funny? Everyone else is wrong.
It is. I know people are going to say Enema of the State. Like, look, Enema of the State is maybe
Again,
their
is
most
a masterpiece.
Yeah, and it may be their most important album because that's how things launched
it's their
for them,
dookie.
and it created, or it didn't create, but it pushed further into the mainstream what Simple Plan and Yellow Card and Sum 41 and everyone else that was going to come after them, closely after them, was gonna obviously be successful in. But
I mean, it's the Mario Kart 64 of their lineup. It's not necessarily the best to come back to, but it has a charm, and you cannot discount its influence of how many incredible games we have because of that. And if you go back to it, you might be like, oh, this is a little quaint, but like, I don't think you can understand how hard All the Small Things changed the face of music in the Western world. It's not my favorite song on the album, but like the influence is undeniable.
I love that. I love that. It's like going back to Take Off Your Pants and Jacket is my Majora's Mask, man. It's just it is. I'm always kind of like.
No, I get that. I get that. Buddy, I have one other thing. This is the big. This is the big reveal. This is the big reveal.
Do it.
Okay, so you're talking about obvious Cure influence, right? But there's a lot of new wave influence on these guys in general. You know, I Melt With You by Modern English, right?
Yeah.
I'll stop the world and melt with you. So the main hook of that is ooh, 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 right? And that has been just rampant throughout Blink's music since Dude Ranch. It's this thing where you're doing dotted eighth note, quarter note, outlining a triad. That has been everywhere. Like the most famous one, obviously, is right after "This Is Growing Up."
You're blowing my mind right now.
And that has come back in various forms. Like, I feel like Dysentery Gary kind of does it, but not quite. It goes the it
Right.
almost does it, and then in the bridge with the it's almost doing it. Even If She Falls very clearly does it with the but on this album, in Other Side, because remember, the first one was just how does Other Side start? It goes like it's the same thing. And then how does Fell in Love start? It goes do 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 do. Same notes again.
That's crazy, man.
Keeps coming back.
Just when I was singing your praises about just how fun this conversation was and just being able to kind of deep dive into Blink and knowing their history and stuff, you go ahead and you end it with one of the coolest things ever, man. That's awesome.
I got a Sum 41 one for you later based on your hat. There's one that they do too.
Well, hey, they are releasing a double album called Heaven and Hell March 29th of next year, so I may have to have you back for that review.
Oh, I'll do that. I will absolutely do that. I'll go listen to Chuck again.
Oh, Chuck is my favorite album. Are you crazy?
Oh, is it?
It's my favorite album of Sum 41, Chuck.
That makes sense. That makes sense. It's well, no, it's not the heaviest one anymore. At the time, it was the heaviest one, but
yeah, no, I just think the songwriting on there is just like so much fun. It's flawless to me. That's a 10 out of 10. Even though All Killer No Filler is still in does it. Anyway, we're getting into a whole different conversation. We'll leave that to next time.
When that happens, I'll come back.
All right. Well, thank you once again, Alex. I really, really love talking to you about all of this. And for everyone that's watching, you can catch our podcast, obviously, every Monday. Screams and Sorrow, just look at it for on your favorite podcast services. You can also check the live video if you want to see these two beautiful faces talk. I don't know why I included myself in that, but I feel like this handsome face, I mean, you know, if you want to see what I'm talking about, you got to head over to my YouTube channel. At Elder E Monk over on YouTube. You can also catch up on my reactions. We'll be back again next Monday with another episode, and even through the holidays you guys can check those out. But Alex, thank you once again. Really love talking to you.
I love you, man.
And hopefully I get to see you one more time.
You better believe it. See you anyway.